So what if all these everyday landscapes that we see, mountains, hills, you name it, are actually just the remains of giant titans that existed in the not so distant past? What if the world we're walking in, what if most of it is just one giant graveyard of titan remains, right? And the more you look into this topic, the more you start realizing that this is definitely heading towards, the truth, that the probability of this being the case is true. At face value, of course, this idea that Titan beings, several meters tall, right? I mean, I'm talking about more than 100 meters tall, actually existed, or 100 feet tall, actually existed, and that they were wiped out. Of course, we're not told about these things in the public education system, right? We're kept in the dark about most things, most truths about this world, and we're force-fed this mainstream narrative of what our history is and, of what it's not. Again, it doesn't take much research to start finding out that Titan beings, that giants existed in our past. The evidence is overwhelming. Titan weapons, bones, architecture that makes no sense for our current humanity to have built. Again, at face value, I can see how this idea might seem ridiculous, right? Especially if you're a newcomer to these sort of topics or ideas. It definitely seems ridiculous. How is it possible that Titans existed in the past, right? That's just something we see in the movies, right? That's just something we see in TV shows. But again, if you do your own research, you start finding out that this is definitely the case. So what happened to these Titans, right? A lot of their remains, right? A lot of their fossilized remains are still here with us today. It can't be just a coincidence that all these mountains, all these landscapes, some of these things considered sculptures, quote unquote, right, all around the world, resemble Titan beings, and they look like human beings. Actually, they look like human beings, just obviously a lot bigger than you and I. So the question is, what happened to these beings? So before I get into some of the theories surrounding this, I'll explain what permineralization is. Permineralization. It's basically the process of minerals, whether it be from the ground, the ocean, or from lakes, right, seeping into the pores of organic matter and replacing the organic matter with these minerals, right? So basically what happens is it's like a hard casing that envelops pretty much every part of, this organic matter, and it basically preserves it. It preserves the details of the original matter in question. And, it basically makes it into a fossil, right? It petrifies it. So a lot of the time when this happens, the matter in question is preserved almost perfectly, right? Of course, you're not going to see fine details in a lot of the cases, but it preserves the overall integrity of it. So this is an interesting point to note, because the first theory surrounding these Titans and what happened to them, something that is very common to hear about, is that they were wiped out in a great flood. So the Great Flood is mentioned in the book of Enoch, right? The details as to why that flood happened and the aftermath of it and why it was done in the first place is explained. It also talks about it in the book, in the Bible itself, in Genesis, how God created a great flood to wipe out all the evil things that were going on in this world, right? All these giant beings that existed, all these Titans, all these corrupted animals, you could say, right? But it's not only the book of Enoch in the Bible. This great flood is mentioned in other stories throughout history as well. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, in the Indian epic, the Mahabharata, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Mahabharata talks about a great flood in ancient Persia. In Zoroastrian writings, there's many fables talking about a great flood. So it's literally in so many cultures and so many countries throughout the world talking about this same flood that occurred, right? So obviously to us, most of these things are labeled as fables, but if there's so many connections, if there's so many parallels with this story in different cultures of the world at different times, it makes you think that this goes beyond just a fable, right? That it goes beyond just a story that was created, right? And it might actually be something that happened. But of course, the mainstream, right, labels it as a fable or as a fantasy story, to hide the truth from us, basically. So again, it makes you wonder if all these stories, right, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for example, are actual accounts of, things that happened in our not so distant past. And again, what are the odds? What is the probability of it just all being a strange coincidence? All these stories interconnected throughout time, right, at different points in time, in different countries, when technology, I guess, wasn't, or, I assume it wasn't to the point that it is today, where people just couldn't talk over the internet or something like that. Maybe they had something similar, but, how is it possible that all these different cultures and countries throughout the world share the same story when they had literal no connection, between them, when they were thousands of miles away from each other, right? What is the probability of that actually being the case? So I mentioned this video a lot in my channel. It's called X Factor Winner Reveals World's Secret Religion. And the reason as to why I mentioned that video is because it's very eye-opening, and it reveals the reason as to why truth is shown to us in plain sight, and why a lot of the time it's labeled as fiction or fantasy. I recommend watching it if you haven't already. It's very eye-opening. Like I said, it dives deep into the reasons why, and the guy in the video, he touches upon a lot of other interesting subjects, not just that one reason, not just why truth is shown to us in plain sight. So giants are portrayed in all types of media, right? In movies, television, music. Game of Thrones, for example, a Disney movie or a Pixar movie that came out not too long ago, The Big Friendly Giant, right? Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack the Giant Slayer. All these so-called fantasy movies, right, might actually be telling us the truth right in our face. And there's this interesting manga called Dr. Stone. And basically, the synopsis of that manga is that humanity was basically wiped out in the blink of an eye by some sort of cataclysm that turned everybody into stone. So again, there's an interesting parallel between, art, so-called art, quote unquote, and the real world, right? That's just an interesting parallel that I noticed. So again, it just goes back to truth being told to us right in our face, and being able to recognize it, I guess. So just going back to a point I made earlier, how there's always officially, how the official story is always something different to what the truth points to, right? Not just in this particular topic, but in general. There's always some sort of justification, some explain away, right? That if you do your own research is, different to the actual truth of things. There's always some sort of explain away, right? In this case, for instance, a lot of these structures, a lot of these landscapes are just labeled as natural occurrences, right? Or some sort of architectural piece or artistic piece. It's always something different. And this is the case for a lot of things, right? And just in general, once you start doing your own research and drawing your own conclusions, you start finding out that we're pretty much lied to about most things, right? And truth is sprinkled now and then. It's sprinkled now and then. You find things that are mixed with truth and are mostly lies. So the importance of just doing your own research and drawing your own conclusions is so vital, and not just accepting things at face value. So that's just, again, one theory surrounding this topic, that a great flood came and wiped out all the giants and titans. And of course, with the process explained earlier of petrification, these structures, these giant beings were preserved over time and eventually turned into fossils, right? So another interesting theory is that they were somehow turned to stone using some sort of technology, or some sort of being turned them into stone. I think back on the Greek mythology of Medusa, and how this creature, right, Medusa, was able to turn things into stone just by looking at them. This could have been a literal story of this creature having that ability. But what if this story is just a way of trying to describe some sort of advanced technology that had this capability? If it was just an attempt by a primitive humanity to explain something that they didn't understand, something that, was otherworldly, that was not of their humanity, right? And this is a whole nother topic of different humanities existing. But again, doing your own research, you start finding out that this is most likely the case, that different humanities with different capabilities and different, stages of technology existed and continue to exist. So again, it's just an interesting theory that I thought of. What if Medusa, this Greek mythology, was just, again, a way of primitive humanity to explain technology that they didn't understand? So this topic is very fascinating and just mind-blowing to learn about. Again, the idea that we're walking on just a giant graveyard, that most of our world is just one giant graveyard. We're walking amongst the remains of titanic beings, is just crazy to think about in so many levels. Again, if you're skeptical about this topic, or in anything in general, again, I encourage you to do your own research, and don't take my word for it. Do your own research and draw your own conclusions. Don't, judge a book by its cover and jump to conclusions based on how something looks or sounds. So I encourage you again to just do your own research and to not jump to conclusions. If you enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. I talk about a wide variety of topics that pique my interest, whether it be, again, titanic beings or giants or famous video games, self-improvement, you name it. Just a wide variety of fascinating topics. If you're interested in stuff like that, if you're interested in videos like that, welcome to the channel. Again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much to all the new subscribers, and I'll see you in the next one.